Time and again, media reports spring up like mushrooms claiming rock-solidly that NASA has discovered a parallel universe in Antarctica. For example, an article entitled "Antarctic Experiment Points to Parallel Universe" says, "A parallel universe is considered the only plausible explanation for scientists. This other universe would have to have been created in the same Big Bang as our own universe." Physicists have long assumed that parallel universes exist in which doppelgangers of us live. Do they really? First things first. What happened in the Antarctic experiment anyway? A team of researchers led by scientist Peter Gorham is trying to detect neutrinos there. They are using the Antarctic Impulsive Transient Antenna, ANITA for short, and it is a really spectacular experiment. Radio antennas are attached to helium balloons floating at an altitude of 37 kilometers to measure radio pulses, which in turn are produced when neutrinos react with the Antarctic ice shelf. Wow, that really sounds like science fiction and is actually spectacular enough without adding stories of parallel universes. To better understand what was discovered there, we first need to clarify what a neutrino is in the first place. Sounds a bit like a Ned Flanders particle. In reality, neutrinos are electrically neutral elementary particles with very little mass. That's why they're sometimes called ghost particles. It's super difficult to detect these ghost particles, plus when they collide with matter, there's only a very weak interaction. Neutrinos can simply race through the whole Earth, but they weaken in the process and don't make themselves very noticeable. That's why a project like ANITA has to monitor a gigantic area from a great height in order to have any chance at all of measuring a neutrino collision. And ANITA did indeed discover something very curious a few years ago, namely, a fountain of highly energetic particles that erupted from the ice and resembled an upside-down cosmic ray shower. Peter Gorham describes it this way: it was as if the cosmic rays had come out of the ice itself. A very strange thing. So we published a paper on it and found that this was in pretty strong tension with the standard model of physics. I can see the question marks in your eyes. Now what does the particle fountain have to do with neighborinos, neutrinos? The theory was originally that a reaction triggered by a neutrino collision in the Antarctic ice triggered the particle fountain, which was then detected by ANITA. This is what was hoped for, after all, since the purpose of the ANITA project is neutrino detection. But it didn't quite fit. The discovery suggested that the signals came from sideways moving particles that had dug through the Earth before bursting out of the ice. Neutrinos are also known to travel throughout the Earth, but they actually weaken much more in the process than the particle detected here did. Simplified, one could say that a kind of superneutrino was discovered here, which burrows through the Earth even more violently than normal neutrinos. Peter Gorham puts it this way: this could suggest that we are actually seeing a new class of subatomic particles that are very penetrating. Even more penetrating than a neutrino, which is quite difficult. So this could be an indication of a new kind of physics that we would have to call beyond the standard model of physics. A previously unknown subatomic particle that cannot be entirely explained by previous theories of physics. This has been the big discovery in Antarctica, but how does the parallel universe that many journalists have fantasized about now come into play? Other researchers who did not work with Peter Gorham and were not involved in the ANITA project have actually come up with a wacky hypothesis. According to this hypothesis, the newly discovered subatomic particle, the superneutrino as we have just called it, originates from a parallel universe that was created at the same time as ours. And in this parallel universe, neutrinos behave in an opposite way to the way they do in our universe. Stephen Hawking already calculated mathematically in the 1980s that parallel universes are possible, but later he specified that he does not believe that there are an infinite number of universes. That there are no universes in which there are twins of us running around, as is claimed in the article. Hawking talks about the need to tame the multiverse theory, but in principle he thinks the existence of a multiverse is possible, but just not infinitely many. He also came to the conclusion that the basic rules of physics would probably have to be the same or at least similar in all parallel universes. So our universe is typical in terms of the laws of nature. If Hawking is right, The hypothesis that there could be completely different neutrinos in a parallel universe or that time even runs backwards there, as some media also say, is pretty rubbish. And quite honestly, the discovery made in the ANITA project doesn't really support the parallel universe theory at all. In my opinion, this is just bad journalism that picked up some lurid claim, and didn't listen to the head of the scientific project that is actually at stake. Because Peter Gorham says the following about the parallel universe rumors: this whole parallel universe thing was not invented by us, but somehow we have been associated with it. Unfortunately, the journalism on this hasn't done a very good job of distinguishing between our experimental work, which has identified some anomalies in the data, and the theory proposed by some physicists who are not part of our collaboration. So, to summarize, NASA has not discovered a parallel universe in Antarctica, but instead has discovered something at least as exciting in the form of a suspected new subatomic particle, and quite independently, it is still quite possible that parallel universes exist. So the reporting about parallel universes was definitely exaggerated. But that doesn't mean that Antarctica has no connection to the cosmos. This icy continent is the perfect territory for meteorite collectors, but some time ago, scientists stumbled across a rock there that they would never have expected to find there, a piece of the moon, and the original footage is coming now. There was a time billions of years ago when our Earth didn't have a moon. The Earth also looked very different then. That was a long time before life arose on our planet. And since that was so long ago, one of the biggest questions in space exploration has long been, how did the moon actually form? Let's play a little space game, before we can answer this question once and for all today. Write me in the comments what you think how the moon was formed. How did our Earth get its satellite? I'm very curious what theories you have on this. I'll try to answer as many comments as possible, I promise. There are broadly 3 theories as to how our Earth could have got to the moon. First theory, Earth was very sad one night, drank 4 to 5 gin and tonics too many and then woke up next to the moon the next morning. That's how relationships usually start, isn't it? Joking aside, according to the first theory, the Earth and the moon simply formed at the same time about 4 billion years ago in a particular part within the protoplanetary disk. This surrounded our sun and consisted of rocky debris, comets and dust. It is indisputable that the inner 4 planets of our solar system were formed from this disk. But how likely is it that the moon and Earth formed at exactly the same time? Wouldn't they then have formed as a single, even larger celestial body rather than as 2 separate ones? That is why some researchers proposed the second theory, the capture theory. The Earth emerged from the protoplanetary disk and the moon as a separate celestial body somewhere else in the solar system. The Earth caught it with its gravity like a cowboy with his gravitational lasso. That does sound more likely, but the best known and most widely held scenario is the collision theory. According to this, the Earth was formed billions of years ago and another planet, which was christened Theia, then crashed into the Earth. In this gigantic, apocalyptic collision, Theia was completely destroyed and a piece of the Earth broke off. Theia and the broken off piece of the Earth finally formed our moon in Earth orbit. Accordingly, the moon would be a lost part of our planet, a child of the Earth that we can observe every evening in the night sky, the heart that was ripped out of our planet. Okay, enough poetry. The collision theory is held by most researchers and there is also strong evidence for it. Moon rocks that the Apollo astronauts brought back with them after the moon mission at that time showed astonishing similarities to earthly rocks after several analyses. But the collision theory was never fully proven. How could it be? To prove it 100%, you would have to travel 4.5 billion years into the past with a time machine and see the whole thing for yourself. But now researchers in Antarctica have found something that completes the puzzle. Something that can definitely be considered as confirming the impact theory. They found lunar meteorites in the world's largest ice desert and analyzed them. That's right. There are rocks on our planet that were split off from the moon, presumably by asteroid impacts there, and then hit the Earth. I find this totally fascinating and would love to be able to hold such a moonstone in my hands. When they examined these moon meteorites in the laboratory, they found isotopes of the noble gases helium and neon in them. Now some of you may be saying,
so what? I find enough gases in my house already.
The clue is that these gases match those present in the solar wind. The solar wind is a high-energy stream of particles emitted by the sun to which our Earth is permanently exposed. So if such gases were found in terrestrial rocks, it would not be a surprise. but the lunar meteorites studied come from a volcanic area of the Moon, and from a depth at which the rock could never have been exposed to the solar wind. This basaltic rock formed from the magma that emerged from the interior of the Moon, cooled super quickly, and in the process was covered by more layers of basalt, protecting it from cosmic rays and the solar wind. The rock then lay there, protected, until an impact that was apparently so massive that lunar rock was hurled at the Earth. It must have been a supermassive impact, big enough to dig deep into the lunar surface to reach the rock that had not been exposed since time immemorial. When you think of it all like that, it seems even more fascinating that such moonstones with such a long history are lying around on Earth, doesn't it? Anyway, the important point is this: the lunar meteorite contains gases from the solar wind, which it was never exposed to, even after it hit the Earth, because the lunar meteorites were found well protected under the surface of Antarctica. And from this we can only conclude one thing, namely,
dumb people are always blissfully unaware of how dumb they really are.
namely, that these noble gases must have penetrated the lunar rocks when the Moon was still part of the Earth and its rocks. They were still exposed to the solar wind. Boom. Absolutely solid evidence for the collision theory. Swiss cosmochemist Patricia Will says, the fact that for the first time, we found solar gases in basaltic materials from the Moon that have nothing to do with exposure on the lunar surface is a very exciting result. In my view, the Apollo studies and now the detection of solar gases are enough to consider the collision theory proven. Feel free to write me if you think so too. But there is still one small unexplained aspect: how could it be otherwise in the world of science? How did the solar gases bound in the rock survive the violent crash with Theia? Shouldn't they have been completely destroyed in the course of this collision and with the formation of the Moon? After all, we are talking about immense amounts of energy and heat that were released. This is not yet entirely clear, but it is conceivable that such huge chunks were torn out at that time, all the way to the core of the Earth, which were so massive that the noble gases in their interior were able to survive the whole procedure protected. This fits quite well, because the researchers also found out that the isotope ratio of the neon from the lunar meteorite is very similar to the isotope ratio in the mantle of the Earth. So what was found in these lunar meteorites is really a kind of time capsule enclosed in the rock from the infancy of our planet. Wow! So there are rocks slumbering in the eternal ice that are billions of years old and add to our knowledge of the solar system, but massive geological processes are still taking place there right now. Some geophysicists even go so far as to say that a new continent is currently being formed in the Antarctic Ocean. Find out what this is all about in the last part of our Antarctic series.